Kwa jina ninaitwa Tulo Fundi, mmoja kati ya maafisa elimu taaluma wa mkoa wa Morogoro.
Ninaitwa Mwalimu Jackson Mpanguli, ni afisa taaluma wa mkoa wa Morogoro.
Lengo kuu la kuanzishwa kwa kipindi cha Mwalimu wa Wiki ni kuongeza ubora wa ufundishaji na ujifunzaji wa masomo ya elimu ya msingi na sekondari.
Kwa nini tumefikiria tufanye hivyo? Itakuwa ni nafasi ya mwalimu huyo ambaye atakayepata nafasi ya kushiriki katika kurekodiwa huko kuonyesha umahiri wake.
Walimu wawe huru kutoa maoni yao baada ya kutazama kipindi cha mwalimu mwenzao.
Lakini vile vile itakuwa ni nafasi ya kufanya tathmini kwa upande wa mwalimu mwenyewe, kwa maana ya kwamba yeye pia baada ya kipindi kurekodiwa atakuwa na wasaa wa kuangalia jinsi ambavyo ametimiza jukumu lake. Lakini lingine pia itakuwa ni njia mojawapo ya sisi wenyewe kama viongozi wa masuala ya elimu kufanya tathmini, kuona walimu wetu wanatekelezaje majukumu yao.
Leo katika kipindi cha Mwalimu wa Wiki, kwa niaba ya afisa elimu mkoa ambaye ndiye mwanzilishi wa kipindi hiki, tumetembelea shule ya sekondari Morogoro Sekondari iliyopo katika manispaa ya Morogoro mkoani Morogoro. Na leo hii hapa tutakutana na mkuu wa shule ambaye pia atakuwa amemchagua mwalimu wa wiki kwa kuzingatia vile vigezo vilivyoainishwa. Na leo tutaona anatekeleza vipi majukumu yake, ikiwemo ni njia zipi anazotumia katika kufundisha, lakini vile vile tutaona ni namna gani anashirikisha darasa lake wakati wa ufundishaji. Twende tukaone.
Kwa majina yangu naitwa Mwalimu Joseph Kretus Kapiuka, ni makamu mkuu wa shule Morogoro Sekondari. Kwanza kabisa napenda kuchukua nafasi hii kumshukuru afisa elimu wetu mkoa Joyce Baravuga kwa wazo zuri ambalo amekuja nalo, ambalo na hakika litaweza kuinua kiwango cha ufaulu na kuhamasisha walimu kujituma zaidi kwa kuanzisha wazo la kuwa na mwalimu wa wiki. Kama makamu mkuu wa shule kwa hapa kwetu Morogoro Sekondari, kwa wiki hii mwalimu ambaye tumemchagua kuwa mwalimu wa wiki ni Mwalimu Edgar Msimbe, mwalimu ambaye hakika ni mchapakazi, ni mwalimu ambaye anajituma kwa muda hata wa ziada. Utakuta unaweza kaja hapa asubuhi saa 12, utamkuta yuko darasani anafundisha vipindi vya kawaida, anaingia anafundisha, akipata muda wa ziada tena jioni anaingia anafundisha kwa kujitolea. Kwa hiyo kwa kweli anastahili kuwa mwalimu wa wiki. Asante sana.
Good morning. How are you?
We are fine.
Get seated. So, just before we commence today's lesson, let us remind ourselves, what did we discuss last time? So if you remember, last time we shared about the concept of the cross-section of the river, the cross profile of the river, of the river, where you remember we shared that the cross-section of the river refers to the section of the river that describes the distance of the river from one river bank to another. Do you remember?
Yes.
But again, you remember we said that the cross-section of the river usually it's not homogeneous in all stages of the river valley development. That means it is heterogeneous, where at the upper section of the river, we said the cross section of the river is normally experience a narrowed V shape. A narrowed V shape. Whereas when it goes to the middle section of the river, we said that the cross profile of the river usually experience an open V shape. And lastly, we said as it goes to the lower section of the river, the cross profile of the river usually experience an open U shape. Do you remember? Yes. And thereafter we went further looking on the longitudinal section of the river, where we said this describes the section of the river from its source to the mouth. Assume this one is A, that is B. So when you talk about the source, this is the source, this is the mouth of the river. And this is the upper section, this is the middle section, and this one is basically the lower section. So the distance from here to here is what we call the longitudinal profile of the river. And remember we said this is a function of headward erosion in the river channel. Do you remember that one? Yes. But again we said the cross section is just a function of lateral erosion at the river channel. And thereafter we went further by looking on the concept of graded river profile. Do you remember? Yes. Where we said the graded profile of the river refer to the state of balance. State of balance. Balance attained by the river in its own valley. We said it talks about the balance achieved between erosion, transportation, and deposition. You remember? Yes. But again, we said basically the graded profile of many rivers in the world are not straight. That means the graded profile of many rivers in the world are normally not straight. Rather, they experience a concave shape. A concave shape. And then you have seen, therefore, the attainment of the graded profile of the river is questionable. That means it cannot be achieved. That means the rivers are not straight, and we looked on what are the basic factors that influence the graded river profile, where we have seen the variation in terms of climate. We talked about variation in terms of the nature of the rock, but also we have seen what we call climatic variation. As I said, we have seen continuous rate of erosion, we have seen river rejuvenation, the presence of obstacles, and so forth and so forth. Is that one very clear? Now today, we are going to discuss about stages in the development of the river valley. The river valley. Stages in the development of the river valley. Now you have to understand that usually the river valley develop as the results of surface runoff. As the results of surface runoff by the influence of running water. Usually the river valley develop as the results of surface erosion, particularly by the influence of what you call running water. And we say, basically when we talk about the river valley development, remember, any erosion that is influenced by running water is what we call fluvial erosion. Now, erosion by running water is known as fluvial erosion. Erosion by running water is what we call fluvial erosion. Remember, this is fluvial with AL. But also we have another concept that is fluvial with the O. You don't have AL, rather you have fluvial, this one. Fluvial, this one. Do you see? Yes. Now, when you see fluvial with the O, remember this means landforms that are formed as the results of glacial deposition. Is that clear? That means we shall see when we are going to cover glaciation. So basically, erosion by running water is what we call geographically as fluvial erosion. Now, there are three stages that are involved, three stages involved in the development of the river valley, there are three stages that are involved in the development of the river valley, where number one, you have the upper stage. It is called the upper stage or youth stage. Or it is also called a torrent stage. Torrent stage. And number two, we have the middle stage. Middle stage, which is also called the mature stage. It is also called the mature stage. And number three, we have what we call the lower section or lower stage. It is called the lower stage or lower section or lower course, but it is also named as a plain stage. Plain stage. And basically, in each stage of the development of the river valley, usually the function of the river is different. In each stage, the function of the river is different. And basically the landforms that are going to be formed are also different. Now let us start with stage number one, that is the upper stage. As I said, this stage is also called the torrent stage, but it is also called the youth stage, but it is also called the upper course of the river. So this is the stage of the river where the river owns its origin. It is a stage whereby the river owns its origin, or it is the stage where the river starts. It is the stage where the river owns its origin, and it is the stage where the river starts. And at this stage, usually the slope of the land is high, steep slope. There is steep slope. As we said last time, you remember we said usually the river owns its origin in the highland areas. Is that clear? So if it owns its origin in the highland areas, automatically the nature of the slope should be very high. So the slope is basically high at the upper section. But again, the speed of the river, the velocity of the river is also high. The river is high. At the upper stage, the velocity of the river is very high. Very high, because it's a point where the river now starts. But again, we are saying that the main function of the river at the upper course, erosion. The main function is erosion. The main function of the river is erosion, particularly vertical erosion. That is particularly vertical erosion. Particularly vertical erosion that results to the deepening of the river valley. Remember last time we shared about vertical erosion. That clear? Yeah. So basically, the main function of the river is erosion, particularly vertical erosion that results to the deepening of the river valley. So this is what is happening at the upper section of the river, where the speed of the river is very high. The main function of the river is erosion, and also we are saying that the slope is very high, and the high slope or steep slope is what causes now the speed or the velocity of the river to be very high. Now from there, let us see the landiforms. Landiforms formed at the upper section of the river. Upper section of the river. The landiforms that are formed at the upper section of the river, we have many of them. But number one, we have the V-shaped valley. V-shaped valley. V-shaped valley. V-shaped valley. This is a river valley with V-shape. When we say V-shaped, it means it have a shape, it looks like a V. It's a river valley with V-shape. That is formed, is a river valley. Is a river valley with V-shape. With V-shape. This river valley with V-shape formed at the results. Formed as the results. Formed at the results of the dominance of vertical erosion, formed the results of the dominance of vertical erosion at the upper section of the river, upper section of the river. It looks like a V. That is the meaning of a river valley with V shape. So you can be able to draw like this one. It's a river valley with V shape formed at the results of the dominance of vertical erosion at the upper section of the river. So it can look like this one. This is what we call a V-shaped valley, this one. V-shaped valley. It's a river valley with a V-shape that is formed at the results of the dominance of vertical erosion in the river channel. That is, will form a structure that looks like a V. That is V-shape. Then number two, we have what we call interlocking spurs. Interlocking spurs. Interlocking spurs. And interlocking spurs, these are projection of higher lands. These are projection of higher lands that cuts across the river bedrock. These are projection of higher lands that cuts across the river bedrock. These are what we call spurs or interlocking spurs. Projections of higher lands that cuts across the river bedrock. These are what we call spurs or interlocking spurs. Why are we calling them interlocking? Because they are intersecting each other. They are called interlocking because they are they are intersecting or they are intermingling each other. This is the meaning. So they can look like this one. You can have like this one. So this one, it cuts across somewhere there. It cuts across. These are what we call spurs. Because you cannot be able to see the river bedrock being very smooth. Rather, it's going to have some interlocking, some spurs, some cuttings. And these are basically being cut by pebbles in the river bedrock. These are what we call spurs or interlocking spurs. But again, we have gorges, number three. Gorges. These are steep-sided trough. These are steep-sided trough. These are steep-sided trough or depressions. These are steep-sided trough or depressions formed as the results